I've put, hopefully you can see that it's the gold star. So it's a existing sort of vacant industrial unit. It is within the boundaries of Lewisham Town Centre. So I've included some extracts from the Lewisham Town Centre local plan. On the left-hand side, you've got the boundaries in the red and kind of character areas. And on the right-hand side, you have the allocated sites. So, for example, the ones along Lone Pit Vale. So this site isn't allocated, but it's just a site within Lewisham Town Centre. So in policy terms, it is within a town centre. So the application site's here in the red. It's bound by 2 railway lines, and the River Ravensbourne to the right-hand side. So aerial shot on its side. That's the existing sort of largely single-storey industrial units and the car park, and you can see the verges and the railway line there. So some photographs coming up. So the first is the entrance from Silver Road. There's a large gate, and there's also the main approach. There's also a separate access on the side of the embankment, which is Network Rail property. Some of the photo looking from Silver Road towards Odell Walk. Those properties are actually across the river, but they're quite close. They're quite close to the embankment edge.
Before you move on, can you tell us what direction we're looking at?
That is looking east.
Looking east.
And here, that's taken from the bridge. That's looking south. And this is a view of the application site. You can see the kind of grey sheds from the bridge on Smead Way. And a bit of a contextual drawing. The application site is on the lower red circle with the massing illustrated for you there, the river, and then the larger mixed-use schemes within Lewisham Town Centre. So the application before you is for the demolition of all buildings on the site and for the construction of a single sort of linear Z or S-shaped block which runs sort of north to south. So north being on the left-hand side here. So this is a ground floor plan split, so you have commercial property of 740 square metres lining or facing the railway edge, and some ground floor residential facing onto the river. Areas of landscaping, and there's 8 accessible car parking spaces there. So at the first floor, you've got the first floor level of the commercial units, and again you've got the residential facing onto the river. Facing east, and then typical floor plan that rises up throughout the development, so you can see that quite distinctive S or Z shape. And at 5th floor level, the building starts to break away to form 2 distinct blocks. So you've got a base of the lower floors, and then you've got 2 taller elements on top, and then 8th floor it breaks away again, and then you've got the tallest building to the south, rising up to level 15 there. So a roof plan, there's a mixture of planted roofs for habitat, and there's also amenity roof gardens as well for residents. So this is the west elevation. This is facing the railway line here. So you can see the double height plinth with the commercial units and the residential on top. And that tallest tower is to the south. And then the eastern elevation, so flipped around, this is facing east. You can see the double height of the residential ground floor this time, and then you've got the taller break in the middle and the tallest tower to the south. So some visuals now. This is a CGI by the architects of the entrance to what they're calling Riverside Square. It's a large area of public landscape space adjacent to the river. And this is kind of taken from the sky, but as originally submitted, this scheme was 153 units. So that was the scheme as originally submitted, and I'll explain some of the differences when I come on to this in a bit. Through some negotiation as a result of concerns about daylight and sunlight impact, the scheme has been reduced to 136 units, and if you just cast your eye on the 2 pointy blocks in the middle, you can see they've come down in height. Can you see that? Yep. So we've got 136 units. So I'm trying to present 136 units. That's
Excuse me a minute. I did say at the beginning that this is a meeting held in public. It doesn't have to be, actually. And so if we can't conduct the meeting, then it can't continue in that way. So please don't interrupt presentations and just be polite, actually. Thank you. Okay.
So the scheme as revised, as a result of concern about daylight and sunlight impacts, there's now been a reduction in accommodation and physical built form, now 136 units. So this is 9.8% of our total annual housing figures based on our current target of 1,385 units per year. That is due to an increase of 2,117 within the next London plan and possibly higher within the National Planning Policy Framework. But as it is 1,385 units, and that's 9.8% of our annual total. And again, another visual for you there, the backdrop of Loampit Vale in the background. So this is a CGI, this is the revised reduced scheme. From the very north of the site on Silver Road, so that's the entrance, that's small gate on the sort of to the right of that image is the Network Rail access. So you can see the double height commercial space with the letter A and the residential on top. And going deeper into the site, you've got the same, and you can see the commercial layout, the overhang of the residential, and the Z shape that I mentioned earlier. So some townscape views, again from the bridge on Smeeth Way, you'd see the tall element of the 15-level building and the sort of subservient middle block. And then from Odell Walk, you can see the buildings behind the existing terrace of properties there. And some landscaping detail from the Riverside Square. So this fronts onto the Ravensbourne river edge, so trees, planting, new landscaping, replace what's largely vacant buildings and car park. And roof level, you can see the mixture of roof level podium amenity spaces and planted roofs, and also solar voltaic panels for energy. And a bit more detail of the amenity space, you can see its size. The scheme is car-free with the exception of 8 accessible parking spaces. The applicant proposes 3 years of free car club membership, and this shows the Zipcar locations in Lewisham Town Centre, and more are generally being added as other schemes come forward. And that's the same visual of the revised scheme for you there. So from the consultation, 242 objections have been received. These are detailed in paragraphs 5.10 and 5.11 of your agenda. And a petition signed by 162 signatures is also received. The Lady Law Society have also objected. The consultation responses are set out in full on pages 28 to 38 of your agenda, so including TfL and the GLA. Your agenda sets out the principle of development, design, housing quality, scheme viability, amenities, highways, employment and energy. You also have an addendum report which sets out a revised affordable housing offer and a minor amendment to Section 106 obligations. I'll come back to those in a minute. The principle of development for mixed use is acceptable and will contribute nearly 10% of the borough's current annual housing targets. With regards to design, the scheme has been through extensive pre-application discussions and design negotiation. The scheme is designated as being within Lewisham Town Centre, and officers consider the height, although taller than surrounding buildings, to be appropriate in the context. Detailed drawings have been submitted to ensure design quality. The identity of the scheme is also within the London Plan ranges. With regard to the scheme viability, and we have the viability consultant who we used here today, was originally submitted with 153 units, including 44 affordable homes, or about 29%. However, in reviewing the proposals, officers raised concerns with regards to the bulk and scale of the development and the impact upon daylight and sunlight to surrounding properties, particularly on Smeeth Way and Odell Walk. and therefore could not recommend the scheme for approval on that basis. The scheme was therefore revised to reduce the overall scale of development, and as a result 17 residential units were removed. The affordable housing offer was subsequently reduced from 29% to 20.6% by unit, or 21.6% by habitable room, due to the reduced overall quantum of development. The council appointed independent consultants Urban Delivery to review the proposals, who have agreed with the findings of the viability report. The viability has also been reviewed by the GLA. Affordable housing will be secured within a Section 106 legal agreement, along with a robust viability review mechanism to reassess the viability position in the future to see if affordable housing can be provided. Scheme viability set out on page 58 and 59 of your agenda, and the viability report is published as an appendix. Officers acknowledge that there is a reduced affordable housing offer, and there have been extensive negotiations with the applicants regarding the tenure. 86% of the affordable dwellings would be affordably rented at a rent level which is accepted by the council's housing team as being genuinely affordable. The applicant has submitted a revised affordable housing offer, so there are two on the table, which set out in your addendum report. This adds 2 further units, but changes the tenure to 100% London living rent. This overall rises from 20.6% to 22%. Officers, in consultation with the council's housing team, are not able to support this revised offer, as the council cannot place residents from the council's housing waiting list into London living rent, and they're not being viewed as affordable as the existing offer. So the original offer of the rented units, for which the council can use to reduce its housing waiting list, is therefore supported. With regards to residential amenity, there would be an acceptable separation distance to neighbouring properties. It is considered that the distance of the block from Smithway, Odell Walk and Sala Road, which is to the west of the railway, is also acceptable in the urban context. As I said, there are 8 parking spaces on site, otherwise it's car free. The applicant would provide 3 years free car club membership, again secured through Section 106. The addendum report also revises the obligations to remove works of the crossing on Lone Pit Vale, as they're considered to not be required. Following a further review of the scheme that's been accepted by our Council's Highways team, the funding for that would instead go towards controlled parking zone in the area. So officers conclude that the scheme would be of an exemplary design quality, and therefore request that members agree to the recognition to grant permission, subject to referral to the GLA, and completion of a Section 106 agreement set out on page 75 onwards of your agenda. Thank you.
Can I ask you something about what you said about the addendum report? Because you said officers don't support the change in affordable housing, but that there are other changes in the addendum report?
That was just the highways I mentioned at the end.
Right,
That was it.
Okay. Right, do we have questions to the officer? No? Oh,
One question. Thank you, Chair. When you talk about public land, do you mean private land that's going to be made accessible to the public, or do you mean publicly owned land?
So it's privately owned land,
Right.
that would be open to the public, so it wouldn't be gated or anything like that. It would just be open that you could walk. You
It's
could walk
just
and
that
sit there.
I understand. That's what I thought. I don't think it's. I don't think we should refer to that as public land, because it can generate a misconception. There's a lot of land that the public walk through and consider to be public. In fact, it's not. It's private. It's just that we've been allowed to under certain circumstances. So I just wanted to clarify that's the case with this.
So to confirm, the land is privately owned,
Yes.
but it would be open to access generally to anybody.
Yeah, but that, and would it be a breach? What would happen if they decided to no longer open it?
So if they
gate
wanted
it,
to gate it, for example,
rent it, to develop it.
well, if they wanted to sell the land to someone else, they're entirely free to do so. But if they wanted to gate it, for example, that would need permission and it would not be granted.
Councillor Rubin?
Could you just elaborate the 5.27, the context and so on? The GLA stage on response letter says the Mayor considers the application doesn't comply with the London plan, but possible remedies could address these deficiencies. Can you give me some background on that? What's the practical outcome of that?
What paragraph was that, sorry?
It's 5.27 on page 28 of the report.
That's because the GLA stage on report came in October 2017, which was in response to the original submission before the revised applications, before the application subsequently revised. I mean, I think that the revised, there's been ongoing discussions with the GLA the entire time we've been in contact with them now, just to iron out any sort of, to make the scheme as compliant as possible. But I think the key one that it refers to, where it says it's not meeting London plan policy, is that it doesn't deliver 50% of what we're asking.
So,
Let's just follow up. I'm sorry to be pedantic, but when you said we're working towards making it as compliant as possible, I thought you're either compliant or not compliant. I don't think there are shades of compliance. There are definitely shades of non-compliance. But what do you mean by that? As close to, but not meeting compliance as possible.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Cullen?
Just seeking a bit of clarity on the point that Councillor
Can
Sorber
you try
made.
and use a microphone, because I'm not sure all the public can hear.
Just want to some clarity on the point that Councillor Sorber raised about public access. Is that an actual condition that must be maintained at all times, access to the public, without any changes whatsoever, or how does that work?
So the applicant hasn't shown there to be any gating or enclosure of that riverside space. So their application shows it being accessible to the general public on a day-to-day basis. On other schemes that have sort of large areas of public realm and landscaping, for example, we've secured public access management plans through Section 106. That's something that we could do on this. So they're sort of legally bound to sort of demarcate areas for free flow movement. So that's something that we could do.
That could be done.
Yeah.
Further questions? Councillor Mullins?
Sorry, but does the scale of this building need a consultation from the fire brigade? Because I can't see any of them being consulted here.
I understand that they weren't consulted, but I have been in liaison with the applicant team during the pre-application discussions. But perhaps the applicant can.
Councillor Cohen?
What is the maximum height you think you could get for a tower block in that space?
I'm not sure I answered the question.
Well, if someone came to us with a planning application, they wanted to put in 20 stories, or say 25 or 30, where would you draw the line?
Well, the application before you is for a maximum of 15, so you are considering 15. Previous proposals that haven't come anywhere near a planning application on this site have been 20 plus, and we have resisted those.
And that's why I'm sort of probing, because obviously I appreciate that we can only decide on what is before us, but then leading on from that, what can inform our decision is, we have to decide, is it too high? That's one of the decisions we have to make, you know, what impact will it have? And I'm trying to get a sense of what's too high, what's too low, or if you see what I mean.
Okay, so the application was submitted with a townscape heritage impact assessment, visual impact assessment, which modelled a number of different heights of the tower. I think the lowest is maybe 12, and the tallest is 20. Now, 20 will start to have a much more visible impact from longer views. But the shorter tower at, say, 12 stories, made the whole building look very sort of squat. So the height of the tower sort of makes it seem a little more refined and religious.
Okay. I know that's a question for later, but I would see an important point here, because this is going to be crucial to our decision, so I really do want to push this a little bit, just to make the point, and that is a subjective opinion. I mean, what's squat and what's, you know, that current building was considered to be of a normal size, and no one considered it to be squat. So I'm just trying to make a point for all of us, is that this is a subjective decision at times. Thank you.
I'm trying to point out that what we're considering is what's before us. We're not considering what might have been put before us or what could be put before us, but what is put before us. Right, can the applicant come forward, please?
You've got the people that answer questions up now as well.
Chair, my name is Marlon Dean. I'm an Associate Director at DP9 Planning Consultants for the Agents for London Square. I'd like to start by thanking officers for their well-written report, the presentation and the recommendation for approval. Without taking up too much of your time, I'll quickly run through the short presentation document that members should have in front of them now. Page 2 includes a summary of the scheme and the associated benefits. In total, it will provide 136 new homes, of which 28 are affordable homes. This comprises 24 London affordable rent and 4 shared ownership units. The affordable units, the rents will be genuinely affordable. As by way of example, it's estimated that the 8 3-bed family homes will be rented for £161 per week. Further to that, the scheme provides approximately 740 square metres of local flexible employment space, which equates to approximately 50 jobs for the borough. Proposals will regenerate a rundown brownfield site on the edge of Lewisham Town Centre, which is also in an opportunity area. It will also open up access to the River Ravensbourne and access for the general public. It will be a building of the highest design quality and which has been supported by Lewisham's design review panel. It also provides significant new planting and greening of the site, which maximises benefits to wildlife and biodiversity. On page 3, again, you can see another aerial view, just quickly pointing out the context. You can see the Sundermead estate to the left, the data centre, which is at the top of the picture, and Riverdale House in the top right of the picture, as well as the railway lines, as previously pointed out, and the River Ravensbourne. The rundown existing building is shown on page 4. Again, the landscape master plan on page 5 shows how the site will be opened up and high quality landscaping introduced throughout. Again, it won't be gated, it will be fully accessible by the public. It's also worth noting there's going to be 360 square metres of child play space for various ages around the development site. Page 6 is quite important because it helps to illustrate the sculpting of the building form and massing in order to minimise any potential impacts to neighbouring properties. The setbacks are a minimum of 21 metres and actually extends, well, the minimum to the west is 61 metres to Masala Road, going up to 107 metres to the south, which is also separated by the railway viaduct buffer. Page 7, just quickly touching again on the extensive pre-app engagement we've gone through with officers, 7 pre-app meetings starting in July 2016, also with the public, holding 2 public consultation events and a public meeting which was chaired by Lewisham. 2 meetings for the GLA whereby we are now, as the case officer pointed out, in agreement on all parts of the scheme, and also 3 design review panel meetings which were a very positive process and helped to sculpt where we are now. Again, quickly touching on viability on page 8, the process has been gone through in a normal manner with Lewisham, GLA and their independent advisors. Importantly, we've secured London affordable rent for the rented properties which are genuinely affordable and closely linked to the traditional social rent levels, which will allow Lewisham to allocate people from their housing needs. And they'll be provided on secure long-term tenancies, so as an example of the rent levels are provided there. Page 9 again touches on the how we've listened to the feedback from officers and residents and reduced the scale and height of the building, which resulted in 17 units also being retaken from the scheme. The next few images again show the ones that were previously shown in the officers' slides. And just to summarise, just would like to say that we hope that you can support the scheme for the redevelopment of Acton House and provide 136 new homes for the local area, including much needed genuinely affordable homes, a building of high quality design with high quality landscaping and the opening up of the Ravenbourne River. We hope members can support the officer recommendation for approval, support London Square's proposals and their associated benefits, as they try to bring regeneration as part of the town centre. And the applicant team and I are here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
I've got a question that I want to start with, and that's the affordable housing. Is that throughout the development? Looking at the papers, it looked as though they were concentrated in one place. Does that mean that the affordable housing is not of the same quality and design as the other housing?
So that's right. The affordable rental units are located in one block, which is a requirement of registered providers. They're tenure blind, so they're exactly the same as the other properties.
Thank you. Right, questions from members to the applicant? Councillor Ingleby.
This might be a question for the officers as well. There was something from Lewisham Cyclists 5.21 in the report about funding, and this may be part of your section 106 negotiations. I'm wondering whether you're amenable towards this. Suggestions are linked towards Ladywell and Alton Street, either under or over the railway, which has always been a long-term objective of the National Cycle Network before. It says their bridge was built across the river by 2 buses through to High Street. A similar link would help in achieving this aim. It's perhaps a little more exciting when cycle provision is thought about in outdoor terms rather than just running things inside all the time. And/or do you have thoughts about putting things outside the buildings, inside their bikes up? For all the public that are going to be coming through there.
So in terms of the obligations secured in terms of transport, again, there is car park membership for 3 years. There's going to be contributions to reviewing the controlled parking zones in the local area. There is also a contribution towards the alarm. In terms of cycle parking specific for the site, I think I have it in front of me here. There's 264 cycle spaces and 12 specific to the commercial elements, and a number of which are located outside the building.
But what are your thoughts about the cycle networks? Providing in your 106 negotiations, but the money towards contributions towards the suggestion in the report there.
Well, I mean, at this stage we haven't been asked to contribute towards that, and as far as I'm aware, the transport team are satisfied with the contributions we're making to the transport network.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cohen?
Thank you, Chair. The revised application, some of the residents, they're very concerned about loss of privacy and loss of light. How would you address that? Because they're quite convinced that this height is going to lose up to 45% of light. What's your answer to that?
I can quickly touch on the privacy point, and then I'll probably pass over to one of the experts. But I think the diagram I showed with these kind of setbacks between adjoining properties, I think it's normally considered that 20 metres is a good separation distance for properties. A traditional London street, probably a little bit less than that. We've got terrace houses, so 20 metres is your general rule of thumb. In every scenario we're in excess of that, and sometimes very far in excess of that. I think also it's worth pointing out the way the buildings have been shaped and angled means that there's a far reduced, I guess, number of directly facing windows to one another. For example, the tallest element, which is quite slender, actually at the closest point is a point, so you don't get any windows facing the properties directly next to that. So I think in terms of both the design of the buildings and the separation distances, and working with officers and the design of the view panel, privacy and overlooking has been quite adequately dealt with. I'll just quickly pass over to my colleague Nick, who can touch a little bit more on the daylight and sunlight element.
Hi there, Nick Lane from Point 2 with the Daylight and Sunlight Consultants. In relation to your question about whether the development will have an effect upon the neighbour's light, I think it's the case with any site that forms part of a growth and opportunity area where there's an aspiration for high density development, there will inevitably be a change in light between the existing post conditions, and that will be typical across every single site in London. The key question that we've sought to answer for the developer as well as for the officers is whether the levels of daylight that the neighbours will retain is commensurate with what one would expect within a town centre location that sits within a growth and opportunity area. And in my very firm opinion, the answer is yes to that. We've spent an awful long time trying to achieve it. But the daylight levels that you'll see in Smead Road and Odell Walk are higher, considerably higher, than other areas within the growth and opportunity area. So on that basis, the daylighting and sunlighting that's retained is better than the location where development is taking place, albeit there is a change from the existing condition.
Okay, so there will be a loss of light. That's the point I want to...
There will be a loss of light, yeah, that's unavoidable when undertaking development in central London.
Well, it is unavoidable if you don't put the block up, but anyway, thanks for asking.
Councillor Barnard?
Yes, my question is really about equality, because you say you're going to separate the social rent people with from the others. Don't you think that you are separating the haves from the have-not? And why should that be the case in Malaysia when we are promoting equality?
Okay, just a couple of quick points there. One, I think in design terms, this is not a Lewisham thing, it's a London-wide thing. Registered providers, when they take over the affordable housing, ask for the block itself to be a separate block which they can manage themselves. They don't want to share the service charge which may be associated with other parts of the property. Actually, we've spent a long time crafting the offer here. And actually, the block which is actually to the north, which is closest to the entrance to the site, it's the closest to the shops, it's the closest to the public transport, is actually where all of the affordable housing is. So I think this isn't something that we've done specifically for this site, and if you were to mix those rented units in with the other properties, you would not be able to give it to a registered provider to then take on and manage and provide tenants from the social housing activity.
Do you have a registered provider on board?
Sorry, Simon Parker from London Square. Simon Parker from London Square. We are talking to a registered provider, but we haven't entered any formal agreements as yet.
Further questions from members? Councillor Cullen.
Apologies, I'm halfway through a marathon. I'm following up on that question about light. In previous developments where we've had applications, there's been a projection, you know, using CAD design and the angle of the sun at different times of the day. Do we have that projection available to us that we can all see how the light is affected?
You don't have it available within this presentation, but it has been covered within this extensive report that was submitted to officers for part of the recommendation.
Councillor Silver.
Thank you. Just want to follow up Peter's question about the division between the affordable housing block and the rest. So it's closer to the shops. Do they have significantly different views? And is there any differentiation in terms of sort of noise and the general environment between those two different tenures?
So I would say no, the views are, apart from obviously building going up to a certain height in that location, the views are the same as any other property. If anything, in terms of noise, they are only next to one of the railway lines instead of both of them. If anything, they're probably less affected by noise. And again, the tendered line of Craig's.
So great ship, we have the architects and the architects. I think Marl's point is true that the most noisy part of the site is where the private and the market product is. It's also worth noting that the rental products, the affordable rent, are mainly dual aspect, and that's something we've worked very hard to make the 2 and 3 bed ones mainly dual aspect. So there's 87% of the dual aspect, which is important for family homes, especially for social family homes. So in the sense of tenant line design, we always, as practice design, tenant line, we put extra special effort into those ones to make sure they're dual aspect.
Thank you.
Any further questions from members? No? Well, thank you very much for the update. The officer wants to...
was larger. The application was accompanied by daylight and sunlight and overshadowing assessment. We, having interrogated that report, we considered the impacts, as in the loss of daylight, sunlight and the overshadowing level, to be too significant. At the same time, realising it's a site which is capable of delivering significant housing for the borough. So we suggested that the scheme was reduced in scale and a revised daylight sunlight report be submitted. That was done, and there are significant improvements to daylight and sunlight to neighbouring properties, especially on Ozar Walk and Smith Way. That's on page 65 and 65 to 67 of your report. This is a growth area, opportunity area within not just the Lewisham local plan, but the London plan. And it's quite typical that you would expect to see a level of change where existing properties front onto single-storey industrial units or retail sheds. So very similar thing happens on Langford Vale, for example, where you have Matalan and carpet right sites, and people have been very used to a very open aspect, and that will change with development. So there is going to be an impact. We've considered that to be acceptable, and we've sought to reduce that through the reduction in the scale of the building, which is why you've now got the reduced scale in front of you.
Did that lead to any further questions, Councillor Cullen?
Yeah, it's just it says here that it doesn't conform to BRE guidelines, but that's expected to be expected in London. But that's what I want to know, because the guidelines says predicted on lower-rise suburban environments. I mean, you could call this a lower-rise suburban environment, because so I think what we're going to pivot upon is a matter of opinion. You know, the balance, the income side, because it's not written, you know, as a hard and fast formula or algorithm, and it's still impacting light and sun. So it's I think that's a serious consideration.
So yeah, so I mean, we have gone through this quite thoroughly. We wouldn't have brought this to committee if we weren't satisfied with the impact upon neighbouring properties. You're right in that the character around here is a bit lower rise with the Sundermead estate, but at the same time, in policy terms, you are looking at a town centre site within an adopted town centre in Lewisham. So that's why I had the plan at the very beginning.
Can we see, because before seeing, you know, have you seen the diagrams that show the site projected at different times of the day with different locations of the sun? So we know where the shade falls and what time of day?
Yes, both in the original submission and the amended scheme. The accompanying sunlight and daylight report included an overshadowing assessment, which included the images which shows the estimated projected sun path.
Okay, can we see those, please?
I don't have this as part of this presentation.
Well, I think we should.
I think that it's been said that that was available for inspection for those who wish to see it. Right, and we've seen it's not part of this presentation, but it does exist. The daylight sunlight.
Yeah, all of it's online on the council's website. So under the planning pages, all of the daylight sunlight stuff is available online.
So it has been available to you to inspect as you wish to.
Well, in that sense, I mean, everything is, but we're having a presentation, so it's odd that it's a key of tuition that's not being shown to us here now.
We don't have it. Right, can the objectors come to the table, please?
Sure, if we get it online the office, so we get it on projected, I'm sure that's possible, isn't it?
I'm sure we can try to do that.
Thank you.
Right, several of you have come to the table. Can I point out that there is only 5 minutes. If you all speak at once or speak for 30 seconds each, you'll still only have 5 minutes. Okay? And if the person who's actually doing the presentation can identify themselves with their address, and then if you join in, if you can give your name quickly so that you don't eat too much of your time. Okay? Thank you.
So my name's Alison Waldron, I live at 31 Marcella Road. Before I start, I'd just like to raise 2 points or questions for the officer. One, when I was reviewing for this meeting, a number of the documents that were meant to be uploaded to the site weren't there, so when you clicked on the link they weren't there. And secondly, I just want to confirm, from my understanding of the revised plans, the highest tower has actually increased from 15 to 16 stories, and he keeps on saying 15 stories, and so I just wanted to confirm by the revised plans that are on the Lewisham website, it actually says 16 stories and not 15. That's your plan.
That's 50.
It says 16 on your website, and the plan that's on there is 16, so I'd just like to make that point before I start. So I'll just proceed now. So one of the key concerns of local residents is the building of high-rise tower blocks in the middle of a low-rise residential area. Tower blocks above 5 stories are not in keeping with the locality. The proposal of graduating from 7 to 16 stories will cast a dark shadow over Marcella and surrounding roads, will have a huge impact on the quality of life of those on Sundermead Estate, as these properties are overshadowed by the Glass Mills development, the Citibank Tower and the data centre on Molesworth Street. Properties on Marcella Road have subsidence due to vibrations from the railway line. This construction would further unsettle the surrounding ground and impact the stabilities of these properties, leading to further subsidence. Additionally, the expansion of the Ravensbourne River will increase the flood risk. The Environment Agency, in their National Flood Risk Assessment of 2014, deemed this area to be of moderate to significant risk of flooding, and the London Fire Brigade have issued guidance to local residents should flooding occur. Many properties on Marcella Road have been refused building insurance due to the flood risk. The tower blocks will require deep foundations. Concerns have been raised that such excavations so close to the railway embankment could lead to a train derailment. This raises concerns with regard to access. Silver Road has a very narrow entrance and the proposed development will be densely populated. If there were a derailment or fire, the emergency services would have limited access to the area. Such concerns around access are being investigated by the Grenville Inquiry. Site construction will require large, heavy construction vehicles to access narrow residential streets, including bypassing Prendergast Primary School. This would lead to an increase in pollution, noise and heavy traffic, as well as having an impact on the health and safety of residents. There is a lack of infrastructure to support this proposal. There are 6 primary schools in the area. A resident on Marcella Road, 300 metres from Prendergast Primary School, failed to get their son into any of these options earlier this year. Additionally, all the after-school and breakfast clubs are oversubscribed. We've all experienced the challenge of getting doctor's appointments, with waiting times of up to 2 weeks on occasion. Lewisham Hospital A&E department continually fail to meet their 4-hour target, with some patients who require specialist beds waiting in A&E for up to 3 days for an allocation. Additionally, there are a number of halls of residence in the area, which puts extra impact on local amenities. Transport for London recently asked Lewisham Council to delay construction of a 34-storey tower next to Lewisham Station and the proposed development on the site of Carpetwright on Lone Pit Vale of a 16 and 30-storey tower block until the DLR have more trains in 2022. To paraphrase a quote from Lewisham Council, TfL have completed a review of the current planned capacity of the DLR network. This indicates that Lewisham branch between Brank and Stratford is now operating over capacity. In conclusion, the residents on Marcella and surrounding roads have chosen to live in this part of Lewisham because it offers quite traditional low-rise housing. Tower blocks of 7 and 16 storeys, 61 metres from Marcella Road, will be intrusive to both the front and back of properties and will infringe on the privacy of residents on the Sundermead estate, 21 metres from the construction site and the completed development. This proposal will have a huge impact on the privacy, quality of life and health and safety. Additionally, there concerns this development will result in an increase in crime, opening up sensitive area previously restricted to the public. There have been an increase of burglaries to the back of Marcella Road via the railway line, and this development will further expose the back of properties on the Sundermead estate. There are many high-rise towers in the front of Lewisham Station and along Long Pit Vale. Local residents are unclear why these are 50% occupied and question whether they are sold for profit by developers to investors rather than prioritised for local residents. I ask all those present what they want their legacy to be 10, 20 and 30 years from now. Is it that Lewisham is a progressive council that lead the way and set the standard across London, that they are seen as a desirable area to live with a good mix of quality housing, or a no-go area of high-rise, unattractive housing? Additionally, residents have raised concerns with regard to parking in the surrounding roads. Thank you.
Thank you for keeping so well to time. Thank you for your presentation. Questions from members? Councillor Cohen?
What evidence have you got that it will impact on flood risk?
That is, this is actually from Environment Agency National Flood Risk Assessment of 2014, where they deemed the local area to be of moderate or significant risk to flooding. So it's actually you can look it up on the internet.
I think the question for us, though, because we have to make a decision,
So what
impact would this development have on that flooding risk?
Well, they're actually proposing to open up the Ravensbourne Road, which isn't actually opened up in that area at this point in time. So that would be an increase in water in that area, which isn't there at this moment on the floodplain.
I suppose for us it will be what was the Environment Agency's view of that.
I'm sorry, I don't know if anyone else
In the report, it does give the Environment Agency's amelioration recommendations about where buildings should occur in relation to this. Can you fill us in on that one?
So just to clarify, the applicant is not touching the channel of the river, so they're not actually going to directly channel or expand the width or anything of the river. What they're doing is they're opening up access to the edge of the river within landscapes. So in flooding terms, there wouldn't be an impact, and the Environment Agency has not objected to the scheme.
Can I just clarify something quickly about some sort of infrastructure?
No, we're asking objectors questions now. The 5 minutes went to Strutton.
Is there anything you'd like to tell us?
Very interesting you asked that, thank you. My name is David, I live on the Sala Road. Just very quickly, I'm currently doing a postdoc at St George's Hospital, London. Previous to that, I've worked at Marie Curie on one of the nursing teams. I've been looking into sort of the impact of this development on sort of local healthcare in the area. There are 3 GP surgeries around this area. There's the Triangle Group Practice, there's St John's Medical Centre, and there's the Hillyfields Medical Centre. These practices all have roughly between 10,000 and 15,000 patients per practice. There are 24 GPs in total between those practices. It is important to point out that none of those will be fully staffed every day of the week. The waiting times in these practices, as alluded to, is roughly between 2 and 3 weeks. And it is my opinion, and I think a lot of people would share this, that there is simply no slack in the system at present for a development of this scale. The knock-on effect will be very clear. It will be putting huge amounts of pressure on Lewisham A&E, which is already, as we've said, under huge amounts of pressure. It doesn't meet its full target. I was there the other day, and I had a patient who, in paediatric A&E, had waited for 9 hours. They're just, I can't reinforce the point anymore that there just is not slack in the system. And I'm afraid, having been through this proposal, or Magna Carta-esque document of it, it doesn't seem to make any sort of provision for thinking about the healthcare implications of the development of this scale.
Thank you. Do you want to explain about that, Michael?
So all development is chargeable with what's called CIL, which is the Community Infrastructure Levy, and that's basically a tax, for what of a better word, on all new development that goes towards pooled services such as healthcare, education, and so on. So this scheme attracts a figure of £781,302.40p to Lewisham local CIL. That is payable to the council upon commencement of development, and the council will put that towards improved services. So, for example, there is work with things like the Public Estate, the NHS Trust, for example, and the CCG to provide healthcare. So there is a wider council strategy for healthcare.
Councillor Silver?
It's not a question, it's a response. I was looking at that figure, so I was looking at that figure of 780,000, thinking about not just health, but schooling, and I don't think anyone could possibly say that's adequate to mitigate against the increased pressures on the social infrastructure. And it simply isn't.
I think that's a statutory calculation. It's a statutory calculation.
I'm not saying it's illegal, I'm saying that it's insufficient.
You might be aware the council is currently, it's finished consultation now, it's consulting on a revised CIL charge, which is actually higher than this. So in the future there may be a higher CIL charge, but it is worked out on a fixed term.
Is that because the council and yourself agree that this is insufficient? Is that why we need a higher one?
I don't have the answer to that question, but that is something that the council is looking at. But this is a equation that kicks out a figure, and that's the figure.
Right, are there further questions to the objectors, rather than any other points to be made? Any further questions? No? Right, thank you to the objectors.
I have managed to get the shadowing studies that we wanted. So this is on the website. Is this? Yeah. So on the left-hand side, in the kind of green colour, that's the existing development, and on the right-hand side, the proposed development. So you have to look at side by side. So taken on the 21st of March, which is the kind of common agreed date. On the left-hand side, that is the existing level of shadowing. So the large block on the right-hand side, the long shadow, that's the Citibank building, and you can see that casts quite a long, sort of wide shadow because of the profile of that building.
Could you point that out to us, because I can't quite.
Yeah, so that. So
the green,
this,
the green
so
is the existing.
the green is the existing. The river is here, and this is the Citibank data centre, that kind of red building here. So that is the shadow that is cast by that building as existing. When you add in the proposed development, it's actually shadowed by the Citibank building at 7 in the morning on March the 21st, and that shadow continues on. Moving to 8 in the morning, there's a very comprehensive set of diagrams here. The shadow moves because obviously as the sun is rotating, and this blue shadow on the right is the shadow of the development scheme. So as the applicant was saying, they've intentionally sculpted the form and the tower is very thin to minimise shadow so that they move quickly rather than stay static for a long time. So again, Citibank there, at 9 o'clock, that shadow has moved around, and the shadow at 9 is largely on its own axis and the railway viaduct. Existing at 10, and proposed, again, all on March 21st, the shadow is within the same site and just clipping the garden there. And then at 11 AM, the shadow begins to move around, but they're quite short shadows because on March the sun is quite low in the sky. And as you get to midday, the shadows are here. So there is an element of shadowing here. As you can see, it moves quite quickly from 11 onwards.
And when was this done?
This was
Time of year?
this is all March 21st. It's all the same day. And you go around to the afternoon. Again, the shadow has moved all the way around the site, so you haven't got a static shadow that's there for a long time. It sweeps as the sun moves. So we're now in the afternoon on the same day. The shadow of this building is now over here, and you can see it's clipped the properties and gardens here. And then again at 4 o'clock, it's moved around. And at 5, the longer shadows as the sun is setting, and then by 6 you're into dusk in March. And then June 21st, so high summer. Existing, you've got the Citibank shadow, and then you have the proposed development shadow. This is at 6 in the morning, really unlikely to be used in the garden. And then again at 7 in the morning, again you can see the shadows moving around. And then by 8, again a much shorter shadow, so it is shadowing bits on the Sala, but the shadow has reduced, it's largely over the railway. And then by 9, completely within the railway. And then at 10 AM, again within its own site. 11, midday, there's almost no shadow at midday. And then at 1 o'clock, it's then moved to the other side of the building as the sun has moved around. And then you have 2, 3, that's 3 PM.
So what was that last one? Can you point out Odell Walk and the other?
So Odell Walk's here, and Smead is here, and Marsala is here.
Sorry, did you let it
So
start?
Odell Walk is over here,
Right.
Smead is over here, and then that's Marsala, and that's the Citibank. And then you have 3 PM, 4 o'clock, and then 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7, 8, and then 9. And then this is one for December 21st. So again at 9 o'clock the shadow is relative north. And what you can see from the diagram, so they've done per hour of the day, so it's quite comprehensive. The shadow moving quite quickly around because of the form of the building. So you haven't got one long linear run of building, because it's quite sculpted, the shadows do move, which is to this scheme's benefit. 3. And then they've done, so that's your sunlight analysis there.
Right, are there any further questions at this moment? Right, I do recognise that there are some councillors in the room. Was there anybody who wished to come and speak under standing orders on this item? Yes?
Sorry, I had one question that I wanted to ask.
It's not a public meeting. Councillor Johnson Franklin, do you want to come forward?
Thank you, colleagues. Sorry, I have a really sore throat, so please accept my husky tones. I apologise. How am I going to start? I'm going to raise 2 issues. The first issue is about affordable housing, and the second issue is about the height. In Lewisham, we welcome developers who are going to provide us housing, affordable housing. Yes, we welcome them, but when we look at this particular plan, and I know it's been revised, the 20% affordable housing is really not acceptable. It's far too low. 2 points I'd like to make. The 1-bedroom flats that have been put in the proposal, I feel that from our current housing waiting list, we're not really looking for 1-bedroom flats. We need 2-bedroom flats or 3-bedroom flats, because our families on our waiting list are families with 1, 2, 3, 4 children. So I'm not happy, if that's the right word, to look at the 1-bedroom flat situation. And I would have thought the developers would have had the opportunity to have looked at our housing situation and have looked at offering more than 1-bedroom flats, more 2-bedroom flats. My second point is about the 90k threshold for the shared ownership. Currently, the Mayor of London has a 90k threshold in terms of the level of income to manage shared ownership. I don't think this is going to help our families in Lewisham, because many of our families, and a high proportion of them, are not earning £90,000 a year. Their threshold is about £38,000. So, 4 housing units probably will not be going to Lewisham residents, which I again think is unacceptable given the climate we're in and with our waiting list increasing and not decreasing. I'd like to draw the committee's attention to paragraph 1.7 of the report, if I can. 52. I can. It's page 2, if you're looking on your tablet. And I don't quite understand what this actually means. To me, it says that there could be further negotiations about affordable housing, and decisions will be made at a later date. Well, if there are any decisions going to be made about affordable housing, they're not made at a later date. They're made at a planning meeting in a public arena. So I'm not clear about what that actually means. Chair.
That is referring, I've just checked with the officer, to the presentation that we now have in the addendum. When the original papers were written up, the discussions were being made, which led to the addendum report, which was covered in the officer's original presentation. There is an addendum report, and that was ongoing at the time that the substantive papers were being prepared.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So that means there's going to be no further discussions about affordable housing, and it seems to me we're going to be left with a 20% stack, which is really not acceptable. Is that correct? Sorry, Chair, to put them on the spot.
I don't think I can answer that question.
Okay.
I don't know if
Can the officer answer that question for us?
So the offer for 4 members is 20% in the mix of the rented units and the shared ownership, or it's 22% in the London living rent. But that is not an offer which is supported by officers.
Which you said in the report, haven't you? Yes. Yes, okay, thank you. and I hope that's been noted. I want to go on to look at the height in terms of the 15, 16, 17 floors. I'm not so quite sure about it. Is it 15 or 16?
It's 15 plus ground.
15 plus ground. Okay. I mean, when there's a cluster of high rises, yes, they're clustered together. But this development isn't part of a cluster. Okay. It's on a brownfield site. On a residential area. I know very, very well, and all the residents have come, live there, they know it extremely well. The roads are narrow. I don't need to go on about it because the residents have expressed it very, very clearly. And it seems to me that it's going to be in the middle of an estate that's low density development and has already got an environment, and suddenly there's going to be a 15 plus high-rise story stuck in the middle. And that's what it looks like when you look at this. So it's really important to consider that it's not in keeping with the area. A reduced height might well be acceptable, but at the current level and the way it's been positioned and the comments that have been made by the residents, it feels that it really does need to be re-looked at. And I would be recommending a deferment. Thank you, Chair.
I'm afraid you can't make a recommendation from where you
I know,
are.
sorry, but I thought I would.
Not making a comment in praise of this particular development, but the need for one-bedroom properties is to move people who no longer require a three-bedroom property to be able to transfer. At the moment, there is a need for that.
Yes. And I think we have, sorry, Chair.
Sorry, I think we have to weigh that up as a balance in terms of, but I take your point, okay?
I just felt I needed to say that because we are building one-bedroom flats in order to facilitate movement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, has anybody got any questions to Councillor Johnson-Franklin? Councillor Cohen?
What was your impression or view about the height of the building in terms of the impact of light and sunlight?
On the side of Silver Road and close to the edge of Masala Road, I think that height of 15 is going to have a detrimental impact on the residents, and we can see by some of the patterns of the light. And I feel that there's an opportunity to reduce the height.
Sorry, I had someone asking a question. Are there any further questions? Councillor Cohen.
So just a point for future Chair, you know when I was asking about the projection of the shade and what have you, it's not very helpful to be told it's somewhere online. I think in future if there's an issue that's crucial, it should be available to members to see along with all the other pictures and information. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that the point I was making is this hadn't been hidden from members. Now that we all look at our papers online rather than on paper, these things are often available to us, and it was just making that point. It wasn't unavailable.
No, I understand that, but it's important.
I take your
point
that you would like these to be part of the presentation. Right, thank you, Councillor Johnson-Franklin. Councillor Bill Brown also wishes to come to the table. Thank you.
Again, comments on my side, drawing elegance from colleagues, however. Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief. I just want to highlight, it's already been mentioned, but the fact remains that we don't have a registered social landlord for this development. And if someone's sitting here saying we're going to have lifetime tenancies, well, actually they're not until you get this situation sorted. And it's been constantly in meetings with colleagues, with the developers, etc., that we're going to be getting one, and they still haven't got one. And I just wanted to highlight that to colleagues, that until they get one, you can't sit here and say you're going to have lifetime tenancies on these properties. I'm happy to take any questions if there's any, but otherwise that's my comment.
Are there questions, Councillor Brown? No, you must have spoken very fully.
Thanks, Chair.
Right, does the officer want to add anything to this?
So just to clarify, you are looking at a scheme of fixed scale before you, so that's what you are determining. And in terms of the registered provider, it's quite usual not to have one secured before you have a permission because you don't have something to put the units to. But in terms of what we could do is we could within the section 106 ask them for details on registered provider with the location of the units, something like that, to give extra security that there would be a provider that the council recognises.
And I just want to make it clear, if members have a proposal to put forward, it can be on the substantive proposal or on the addendum proposal.
Yes.
Is there any need for anything to be added either way? Is there anything that needs moving over if they decide to go for one or the other?
So the offer in front of you is for two different affordable housing scenarios. We've said officers and the council's housing team prefer the first one because it's genuinely affordable. The rented nature means that people can be taken off the house's waiting list, and that gets people into fixed accommodation. If members were minded to approve, we could add the public access management that I referred to right in the very beginning.
Councillor Bernard?
I'm not comfortable with the language of the 15-story plus. We normally have either 15-story or 14, but no.
It's 16 stories.
It's a 16-story, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Cohen?
Chair, I'd like to move refusal. I've got some points to back that up.
Yeah, do you want to?
Insufficient affordable housing, it doesn't conform to the BRE guidelines. This is on balance. Obviously we've got a guideline and it doesn't conform to the BRE guidelines for light and sunlight. I also think it's inappropriate massing for the surroundings, the immediate surroundings. And that's it.
I'll just come back to you on a couple of points. So in terms of what you refer to as insufficient affordable housing, the policy position is that there's a strategic target of 50% affordable, subject to viability testing. So in this case, there's been a very thorough viability exercise, not done just by the council and its consultant, but also the Greater London Authority, for which the scheme is referable. So that all happens quite early on in the application, and there's been an awful lot of toing and froing on this to really get the maximum possible. So what officers have sought to do is to really ensure that the units are as affordable as possible through the rental levels and matching the housing allowance and so on. So we're in a position where we have exhausted that at the current position, subject to a viability review mechanism at the future, but in terms of it's meeting its viability position. So I would say that it would be very difficult for us to sustain that as a reason for refusal, and they've demonstrated that, and it's been agreed by our consultant and the GLA. In terms of the BRE guidance, that is guidance, and it's that guidance is intended to be applied flexibly in urban areas. So again, as a result of the reductions in the height and the mass, which we did have issues with before, with the amended and reduced scale, there is a significant improvement on the impact of the properties on Smoothway and Odell Walk in particular, to a point where we consider those to be acceptable. The shadows of the building move quite swiftly east to west, as I showed you, because of the thin nature of the building. It would be quite different. If the building was lower, it would cast a longer shadow because it doesn't move around as quickly. So there has been quite a lot of discussion on the massing. There's a point where we do consider that to be acceptable.
Chair, I take the point about the affordability, but on the other two, it is an on-balance issue, and I think there's sufficient information for me to think that it's too high because of the effect of sunlight, and they're using the BRE guidelines. They're flexible, of course, but that goes either way. And combined with the inappropriate massing height for existing buildings, which we can see quite clearly there, And by the way, that obviously this is good for us to see in context, but that's a view that a crow or a sparrow might have. It's not one that we're privileged enough to have when we're down on the ground at human level. So the impact is much greater. But anyway, the point is, on those 2 points, I wish to move that we refuse.
So you are no longer talking about the viability, you have now accept the viability, so that isn't one of the reasons that you're putting forward. Councillor Sorber.
I'd like to endorse Councillor Curran.
Do you mean that you are seconding?
I'm seconding the refusal, but I want to return to the viability, and I want to add a couple of other points as well.
I think, do we do that?
I have additional grounds.
I think if it's been moved and seconded, we then need to take a vote on that. Or do you want to amend what's been proposed by Councillor Curran? Because at the moment you have seconded what Councillor Curran has put forward.
Only because you said, are you seconding it? And I just went, yes.
Well, no, because we don't say, you know, after something's been moved, we look for a seconder. And you have seconded that motion.
I wanted to continue the debate before we had a vote, Chair, that's all. I thought I might be able to contribute some extra remarks that might influence how people vote.
Well then continue with some remarks that don't constitute an amendment.
No, they don't constitute an amendment, though in terms of viability, it's a comment and a question. So clearly this, the percentage of affordables is unacceptable because it deviates so far from the London plan. If a developer says it's not viable to include a greater number of affordable units, well then they have the option of withdrawing the offer if it's not viable. So I think it is something that we should have mentioned, that it was part of our thinking, that 20% was not sufficient. Otherwise I could come as a developer and say, look, here's my development, but I can only make a profit if we have no social rent housing. And I could be correct. But that's no reason to accept it, just because it's, you know, it's not viable. But I also wanted to add I'm worried about the impact on the social infrastructure as well. Does that not constitute a reason for rejection? Because it's on health and education, but it's also on the list of social infrastructure. Possible impacts include transport and leisure facilities and community facilities as well. It seems to me that we can't guarantee there won't be a negative impact that cannot be offset by the SIL. So those are my additional points.
So just a comment on that social impact. With regards to transport, so things like health, the schools and that are lumped within SIL, and the council needs to spend those on operating services. With regard to transport, there isn't an objection from the council's highways department, and there is not an objection from Transport for London. So the applicant is bound to make a financial contribution towards DLR enhancement. That's set out in the recommendation. That's quite common with other schemes in Lewisham Town Centre that would bring forward the 2022 stock on the DLR. So we would say that a reason for refusal based on in the sort of transport and SIL matters would be unreasonable.
Would our legal advisor like to comment on reasons that are being put forward here?
With regards to the social infrastructure, if the social infrastructure is within the SIL regime, then it's not something which members can consider. If transport have not put forward an objection, then members will have to be very clear as to which transport impacts they are declaring as to why they are refusing.
Use of the roads by private cars.
And the evidence there is?
The new residents are likely to drive cars.
I believe this to be a car-free development.
It's a car-free scheme. Again, within the recommendation in your report, there's financial contribution towards CPZ funding, just controlled parking funding. Residents of this scheme would not be eligible for controlled parking permits.
The car-free scheme doesn't mean that residents can't buy and drive cars. It just means you haven't got car parking. They will do that.
So in terms of the position is that, as I said, there's no objection from our highways officer on that basis. We would not say that is something which we could substantiate as evidence from this scheme.
If I could remind the Chair that there is a motion on the table which
yes. Right, so there is a motion on the table that's been proposed by Councillor Cullen. This is to refuse. This has been seconded by Councillor Sorber. Can I see those in support of that motion, please? Can I see those that are against that motion? Right, the application is refused.